September 11th, 1987. Viewers tune in to the CBS Evening News, only to be met with 6 minutes of unthinkable silence, as Dan Rather vanishes from his own broadcast. But a decade earlier, millions watched a stranger claim marathon glory. Before live commentary unraveled Rosie Ruiz's entire hoax in real time. These are just two of the most controversial TV moments of the 1980s. A decade when sports, scripted dramas, and even in primetime legends exposed the cracks beneath America's living room. How did a single remark, a fraudulent sprint, or a walk-off change what television dared to show? The answers shocked a nation and forced TV to confront its own limits. Let's rewind to where the on-air uproar truly began. April 21st, 1980. Boston streets are packed for the 84th running of the Boston Marathon. The women's finish line is chaos as Rosie Ruiz, a little-known office worker from New York, bursts through the tape in a stunning 2 hours, 31 minutes. Cameras capture her beaming, barely out of breath as officials crown her the new champion. For a moment, she's the toast of the city, until the questions begin. Commentators and reporters are quick to notice something's off. Ruiz doesn't seem to know basic racing terms, stumbling when asked about her training and pace. Legendary runner Catherine Switzer, working as a TV analyst, presses Ruiz about her intervals. The reply, "What's an interval?" lands awkwardly on live TV. Meanwhile, finish line interviews with other competitors and race monitors reveal no one remembers seeing Ruiz along the course. Spectators and officials start comparing notes. The suspicion is growing, and the cameras don't miss a beat. Within hours, race organizers and broadcast crews are poring over checkpoint logs and eyewitness accounts. The Boston Athletic Association calls an emergency meeting, and by evening the story has shifted from celebration to scandal. TV News breaks the update. Ruiz's victory is under review. By the next morning, her title is stripped, and Jacqueline Garreau is named the rightful winner. The entire drama, from triumph to exposure, plays out on national television. Proof that in the age of live broadcast, the camera can catch more than just the finish line. Rosie Ruiz's 15 minutes are up, and TV's power to reveal the truth is on full display. September 5th, 1983. Monday Night Football draws millions as the Washington Redskins face off against the Dallas Cowboys. In the third quarter, Howard Cosell, a giant in sports broadcasting, watches Alvin Garrett, a 5'7" wide receiver, dart across the field. Cosell, known for his rapid-fire commentary and larger-than-life presence, blurts out, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" The phrase lands with a thud. Within minutes, phone lines at ABC light up. Civil rights leaders, including Reverend Joseph Lowery of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, demand a public apology. Newspapers run headlines the next morning, and banners referencing the controversy appear at stadiums across the country. Cosell, who had long prided himself on supporting black athletes and speaking out against racism, insists the remark was innocent, a term he claims to use for his grandchildren and for white athletes in past broadcasts. Alvin Garrett himself says he isn't offended. And public figures like Jesse Jackson and Muhammad Ali defend Cosell's intent. But the damage is done. ABC executives hold closed-door meetings. The network weighs the outcry, the flood of viewer complaints, and the mounting pressure from advocacy groups. By January 1984, Cosell announces he's leaving the Monday Night Football booth at the end of the season. He cites frustration with the direction of televised sports, but the controversy over his words lingers. The incident exposes a generational divide and forces networks to confront how language, once shrugged off, can spark a national reckoning. Broadcast standards will never be the same. Mid-1985 brought a firestorm to network television when reruns of Maude's 1972 abortion episode landed back in primetime, just as CBS aired the school break special, I Think I'm Having a Baby. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Conservative advocacy groups organized phone trees and letter-writing campaigns, flooding CBS headquarters and local affiliates with demands to pull the episodes. Viewer mail arrived by the sack. Some letters pleaded for more honest conversations, but most condemned what they saw as an attack on family values. At the height of the uproar, more than a dozen CBS affiliates blacked out the school break special entirely, choosing to air reruns of older sitcoms instead. Network executives found themselves caught in the crosshairs. Congressional hearings were televised as lawmakers grilled CBS representatives about the decision to air controversial subject matter. Polls from the time painted a divided picture. A 1985 Gallup survey found that 57% of parents wanted stricter controls on TV storylines dealing with reproductive rights. Producers defended their choices, arguing that television had a responsibility to reflect real issues facing American families. The debate over what belonged on TV played out not just in living rooms, but on the floor of the U.S. Capitol. In the wake of the controversy, networks quietly tightened their review process for scripts touching on abortion or teen pregnancy. The message was clear. TV could spark national debate, but it came at a cost. Number 7. Hill Street Blues redefines what primetime drama can get away with. When the series debuted on NBC in January 1981, police shows were still mostly about good guys and bad guys. But creator Steven Bochco had something else in mind: messy streets, flawed heroes, and a world where the lines between right and wrong blurred with every case. Early episodes shocked viewers with raw language and a level of violence rarely seen on network TV. Season 2 pushed even further, with a storyline where one cop shoots another, triggering a flurry of memos between Bochco's team and NBC's standards department. Executives worried the show's realism would scare off advertisers and draw complaints from watchdog groups. Behind the scenes, writers fought to keep their stories intact, arguing that real-life policing wasn't sanitized or simple. The network responded by drafting new guidelines for how much blood, profanity, and moral ambiguity could make it onto the air. These negotiations played out in boardrooms and script meetings, setting the stage for every gritty drama that followed. Suddenly, network TV wasn't just about comfort. It was about confronting the audience with uncomfortable truths. Hill Street Blues didn't just break the rules, it rewrote them. Number 6. Dynasty's groundbreaking kiss puts network TV on the front lines of the culture wars. In November 1981, ABC aired an episode where Stephen Carrington, played by Al Corley and later Gordon Thompson, shares a kiss with another man, making primetime history. The scene itself is brief, but the fallout is anything but. ABC's Standards and Practices Department demanded multiple script rewrites, insisting the moment be as understated as possible. Behind closed doors, showrunners and network executives argued over every detail, knowing advertisers were watching closely. The reaction from local affiliates is swift. More than a dozen stations threatened to pull the episode entirely, while major sponsors warn they'll yank their commercials if the scene airs. Viewer mail pours in, split between outrage and support. International broadcasters, wary of backlash, choose to cut the kiss from their versions altogether. For the actors involved, John James and Gordon Thompson, the pressure is intense, but both stand by the story. Despite the controversy, the episode airs in most markets, setting a precedent for LGBTQ+ representation on American television. The uproar forces networks to confront the limits of censorship and the growing demand for visibility. Dynasty's kiss isn't just a plot twist, it's a flashpoint, showing how even a few seconds of television can challenge, provoke, and change the conversation. Number 5. Prince takes on the censors at the 1985 award shows. By the mid-80s, Network executives were already sweating over what could slip through on live TV, but nothing prepared them for Prince's arrival at the American Music Awards and MTV's Video Music Awards that year. Sporting outfits that left little to the imagination and choreography that pushed every button, Prince turned the stage into his own battleground. Backstage, producers scrambled, wardrobe memos flew, and network lawyers huddled over new dress codes, hoping to avoid a repeat performance. The Parents Music Resource Center, already making headlines for their Filthy 15 list, fired off letters demanding tighter controls and threatening to turn up the heat on broadcasters. In response, MTV and ABC debated installing real-time broadcast delays, just in case another artist decided to follow Prince's lead. While no fines landed on the networks, the panic was real enough to change how live TV handled risky performances. Prince didn't just perform, he forced television to rethink where the line was drawn. Number 4. Madonna claims the throne with just 5 words. On January 14, 1984, American Bandstand welcomed a rising star in lace gloves and attitude. After a performance that left the crowd buzzing, Dick Clark leaned in with his trademark grin and asked what she hoped to achieve. Madonna didn't blink. "I want to rule the world," she said, flashing a smile that was part dare, part promise. The remark hit like a lightning bolt. Clark, ever the professional, tried to keep the show moving, but the studio audience erupted. By the end of the week, conservative groups were already writing letters, calling her statement arrogant and inappropriate for family television. Viewer mail poured in. Bandstand reportedly received thousands of responses, many from parents who swore their kids would never watch again. Meanwhile, MTV and radio stations saw a spike in requests for Madonna's songs, with ratings climbing as teenagers rallied around her boldness. For young fans, it wasn't just a pop moment, it was a declaration. Madonna had turned a TV interview into a cultural flashpoint, showing that a single sentence could make headlines, spark debate, and launch a new era of celebrity power. Number 3, Morton Downey Jr. unleashes chaos on syndicated TV. When the Morton Downey Jr. show hit the airwaves in 1987, daytime talk was about to get a wake-up call. Downey, a former radio host with a cigarette in hand and a bark louder than his bite, turned every episode into a verbal demolition derby. Guests squared off over hot-button issues while Downey egged them on, shouting down anyone who disagreed and whipping up the studio crowd, known as the Beast, into a frenzy. At its peak, the show aired on 78 stations nationwide, drawing in young viewers and late-night insomniacs who couldn't look away. But behind the scenes, producers stoked the fire, scripting confrontations and planting agitators to guarantee sparks. The spectacle worked for a while. By mid-1989, advertisers bailed, major sponsors pulled their commercials, and 3/4 of the show's affiliates dropped it from their lineups. The final blow came when Downey staged a fake skinhead attack, a hoax so blatant it destroyed what little credibility remained. The Morton Downey Jr. show didn't just push the limits of civility, it bulldozed them, leaving behind a blueprint for every trash TV brawl that followed. Number 2. Jimmy the Greek Snyder learns there is no such thing as an off-the-record moment on 1980s television. On January 15, 1988, Snyder, famous for his bold NFL predictions and larger-than-life personality on CBS's The NFL Today, sits down for what he thinks is a casual lunch interview at Duke Zybert's, a Washington, D.C. steakhouse. The conversation turns to black athletes and Snyder, unaware a WRC-TV news crew is recording, launches into a rambling theory about genetics and slavery. By that evening, the tape is on the air. The words are ugly, and there is no walking them back. The backlash is immediate. Civil rights groups, including the NAACP and the Urban League, publicly condemn the remarks and demand CBS take action. Behind closed doors, the network's phones ring non-stop. Affiliate managers threaten to drop the show, and major advertisers warn they will pull their money if Snyder stays. Internal memos fly between CBS executives and the board, weighing the fallout. The pressure is not just moral, it is financial. Sponsors like Ford and Anheuser-Busch start asking pointed questions about the network's response. For a few tense days, CBS tries to manage the crisis. Snyder issues a written apology, but it does little to slow the outrage. Advocacy groups threaten boycotts, and the story dominates the headlines. On the morning of January 15th, CBS announces Snyder's immediate termination. The decision is swift and public, with network president Neil Pilson calling it necessary and unavoidable. Snyder's firing sends a clear message. The old rules of locker room talk and wink and nod commentary do not fly in the era of live TV and instant playback. The scandal forces every sports broadcaster to rethink what is said on and off the air. For CBS, the lesson is brutal, but lasting. Corporate accountability is not just a slogan, it is survival. The network's zero-tolerance move sets a precedent that ripples through the industry, making clear that when the cameras are rolling, there is no such thing as a private remark. Number 1. Dan Rather walks off the CBS Evening News and leaves America staring at a black screen. September 11, 1987, was supposed to be a routine broadcast. The Miami newsroom buzzed with anticipation as Rather prepared to anchor live coverage of Pope John Paul II's visit. But on the other side of the network, the U.S. Open women's semifinal between Steffi Graf and Lori McNeil was running long. Tensions flared in the control room. CBS Sports warned that the news slot might be delayed. Rather, famously protective of his airtime, called CBS News President Howard Stringer and made his feelings clear. If the network couldn't guarantee the news at 6:30, he'd walk. At 6:30 p.m. Eastern, the tennis match still hadn't wrapped. Rather, frustrated and convinced his broadcast was being sidelined, left the anchor desk, possibly to plead his case one last time. The match ended just 2 minutes later, but when CBS flicked the switch to the news feed, there was nothing. For nearly 6 minutes, most CBS affiliates across the country broadcast a silent void. Some local engineers scrambled to fill the gap. Others just let the dead air linger. A modern TV blackout, live and unplanned. New York and Los Angeles, running on a later feed, were spared the confusion, but everywhere else, viewers were left wondering if their sets had broken or if the world's most trusted newsman had simply vanished. Inside CBS, phones rang off the hook. Affiliate managers demanded answers, and internal memos flew between news and sports chiefs. Producer Tom Bettig and his team combed raw studio tapes, trying to piece together what went wrong. Rather issued a public apology days later, admitting he'd let his frustration get the better of him. But in private, he stood by his belief that news should never play second fiddle to sports. The fallout was swift. CBS overhauled its live event protocols, mandating that anchors remain at their desks until officially cleared, no matter how heated the backstage drama. The lesson was clear. In the age of live television, even the smallest miscommunication could leave millions staring into the void. Rather kept his chair for another 18 years, but the image of the empty anchor desk became a cautionary tale for every newsroom in America. On September 11, 1987, 6 minutes of dead air during the CBS Evening News became the most visible sign of live television's unpredictability in the 1980s. This decade's most controversial moments, Rosie Ruiz's marathon deception, Howard Cosell's on-air language, abortion debates on Maude reruns, and the firing of Jimmy the Greek, proved that TV was not just entertainment, but a stage for national conflict. While broadcast memos and news transcripts document the causes and corporate responses, questions about the limits of free expression and the role of censorship remain open. Many network policies from the 1980s still shape live coverage and content guidelines today. As affiliate blackout logs, protest letters, and standards and practices files confirm, every controversy left a paper trail and a public debate. The evidence shows the 1980s redefined what could and couldn't happen on American television, setting standards still tested in every live broadcast.